Good morning, and thank you for joining me for my Confirmation of Candidature seminar this morning. Before I begin, I'd just like to say very quickly thank you to Professor Brabazon and Professor Redhead for their outstanding supervision of my candidature so far. Their input and knowledge and ability and vision has really helped me to shape my research, and I'm very excited to be working with them, and I'm looking forward to continuing that research. Movement space, interactive systems for student dance composition. I'll now like to take you through some of my research and show you the directions and pathways in which I'm travelling. So the background to the study. I began as a composer. I'm a musician, trained musician. I did an undergraduate degree in music, postgraduate degree, honours degree in composition, a master's in music technology. I have a passion for composition. I have a passion for interactive composition, real-time live performance, electronica, synthesis, sampling, and all of those great things that are there. And I've tried to implement those throughout my career as a teacher into my practice. I have utilised a piece of software, a software designing interface or world paradigm called MaxMSP now for about 20 years. It's an industry standard in terms of designing interfaces for just about anything that has a digital output, whether it be a Bluetooth device, whether it be a camera, whether it be an instrument, a MIDI-driven synthesizer, etc., etc. I've had a lot of experience utilising it. I used it in my master's, and I've continued to keep using it throughout the years. Technology, I have a passion for technology. Always have had, even as a child, right through to now. And I just love modern technology. I love computers and phones and devices and all sorts of different toys, if you like. And I have a passion to try to get those and repurpose those and use them. And a lot of my work in this particular research is about repurposing devices for creative output. About 8 years ago now, I started the dance program here at St. Columba Anglican School. And initially it began because I knew there was a large dance community in Port Macquarie, and I had a really great dance teacher at the time. We started the program, 2 or 3 students. We now have hundreds of students in the program. We have multiple dance teachers. We are nationally accredited and awarded and recognised for our work, and it's amazing. We do really interesting stuff. There's a lot of interesting interactive dance happening now. So my work's building upon that development over the last 8 years or so. And of course, I'm also very concerned about living and working in a regional context. I grew up in an urban context, but I've studied in a regional context and worked exclusively in regional centres, from tiny country towns to large centres like Port Macquarie. So I feel that I have a really good grasp on how creativity and how the performing arts work in regional areas, and I would like to make a contribution towards improving that situation, because I am concerned about the future of creative arts in regional context. Why does this research matter? This research matters for these reasons, I feel. I'm utilising current technology, the stuff that's around right now, the cutting edge, the devices that students have in their hands, that teachers have in their hands, and that are very powerful but often underutilised. I feel that I can use those devices to help me with this research. My professional context, my first professional context is about developing a passion for students, for the performing arts, for the creative arts who live in regional areas. That's been the focus of my work as a teacher over the past 20 plus years. So that is something that's very close to my heart. Expansion of the dance curricula, just even in terms of the New South Wales Board of Studies dance curriculum. The references to technology and the use of technology are very, very slim, and I feel need to be augmented and need to be pushed into the next level of what's available out there. So I hope that my research and findings will help inform that move forward. And of course, I'm working currently as a director of a program, so I'm looking for innovative ways of doing things. I'm seeking innovation. I supervise dance, music, and drama, and I'm looking for innovative ways to do that. And in terms of this research, it ticks a lot of my boxes, combining my passion for music, my passion for technology, and my passion for innovation in student learning and education. So the structure of the research. I will produce a number of artifacts which will be based around prototyping of software and hardware interfaces. And then, of course, I will be noting and discussing these findings through the process of an exegesis, and that dialogue between the exegesis and artifact will be continuous throughout the process, backwards and forwards, until I arrive at a place where I am comfortable and feel that I have answered my research questions and that I have achieved my goal and made a significant contribution to knowledge. The methodology which I will adopt will be predominantly practice-led. I've looked at the work of Candy. I've looked at some of the offshoots of practice-led methodologies, those spouted by a Harsman, with performative-led methodology, and then of course practice-based. They're all derivatives of the same thing, I feel. Practice-led, looking at ways in which I can use my practice to inform my research. So I feel the cycle of research is going to be along these lines: looking at the literature, looking at forms of prototyping, software prototyping, iterations of those prototypes based around refinements and discoveries, going back to the literature, going back to the current readings and seeing what's happening and applying those to my iterations and prototypes, evaluating that process, evaluating the effectiveness, evaluating where I'm at, and making a decision as to whether I've exhausted the possibilities or whether I need to look further based on things that may have arisen during the course of the research, and also other areas that I've come across through the investing the time in the reading. And then of course that will be a cycle, and I will cycle through that process for each prototype, and I will cycle through that process within each prototype as I develop iterations of those prototypes. So my original contribution to knowledge will be the findings of the investigation into what technologies best suit this idea of augmenting dance curriculum and having dancers create their own works through movement within a space. That's my contribution to knowledge, but also within the context of how that impacts on students in a regional setting. So I've asked myself 5 research questions. Firstly, what's the best combination of technologies? I have a gut feeling. I have experience in using these technologies, and I think I know what is going to work the best, and I actually also think what combinations will work the best. However, I want to work through a process to determine, what is going to work the best within the context of the teacher and the student. This software needs to be plug and play. It needs to be simple. It needs to have a very, very flat learning curve, so that its uptake and its ability to be put into the system is very quick and easy and simple, and then can be developed upon and can be expanded upon. The cost-effective nature of this application, I think, is a real strength, because there are a number of systems out there that do similar things to some of the devices that I'm looking at, but they're expensive and they require some hardware, some very serious hardware. They require training. They're hard to use, and they're not really suited for the classroom, which may be a mobile place. It may not be a particular room. It may be a number of rooms around the school. It may be in a theatre. So it needs to be mobile. It needs to be cost effective. So I'm looking at that. This is really important to me, and that is how I can perhaps mitigate some of the differences between urban students with enormous resources at their beck and call, both human and digital. how we can provide some support for students living in regional areas, even like Port Macquarie, which is a large regional town, but still has a real lack of human resource. It doesn't attract a lot of people here that are specialists in this area, but we do have access to technologies, albeit slow. The internet technologies are very slow here. We do have these mobile technologies, which are in the hands of students, which are in the hands of teachers, and I would like to use those and utilise those. I believe this will produce, these technologies and this research will produce or suggest new ways of choreographing through movement, students moving, students creating themselves, as opposed to following a script, if you like, a musical script, which has been my experience as someone who writes music for dance programs. Will it be viable? I believe it will, but the research will inform me. I believe that these technologies can be utilised in a way that will make the process viable. In fact, it's the simplicity and the cost effectiveness and the fact that these technologies are everywhere that I think will make it viable, but the research and my investigation of that will inform my decision on that question. So in prototyping, I have two phases. Phase one is looking at the possibilities, the strengths, the chosen technology, going back to the literature, producing iterations, making recommendations from that testing. Phase two is going to be looking at maybe what components of those technologies are going to work the best. That's what I think at this stage, that's what will happen. I will look at these technologies. I don't think I will identify one technology, whether it be a game controller or a phone, that will be the ultimate device. I think it'll be a combination of several, but my prototyping will inform me what the best direction to go is. 4 categories: Bluetooth, color tracking, iOS devices, and wearables. So Bluetooth controllers, we're talking about the Wii controller, the PS4 controller, and the plethora of Bluetooth devices that are out there that can be interfaced using the MaxMSP software and then written into a synthesis to create something musical. Phones, of course, the iOS devices are incredibly powerful computers. It's the best way to say it. Very underutilized though. Have many sensors in them that even their own software doesn't utilize. So I want to look at that. And Android phones are also in that same area. And then look, wearables such as watches, fitness trackers, becoming very popular and just quite discreet, which is an interesting way to look at it. And then other devices that can be attached to the body, Bluetooth trackers, GPS trackers, accelerometers, etc. And then sensors is a fourth area that I'm going to look at. And I think it's going to be a potentially interesting area as we look into the maker movement. And the Arduino board is a very popular device because it's so flexible. You can plug lots of sensors into it and away you go. It's very easy to program. Talks to MaxMSP, talks to iPhones, has all those possibilities. And then you'll see there a little picture of a biosensor. Now that's a very new area where we're using electrical impulses from the body to create data to then be interpreted in some way by a computer. That's an area I'd like to look into, probably post this research, but I will consider it as part of my prototyping. I have 3 examples here of some color tracking.
Sends that through and makes a sound.
Here you see me moving a color around within a video frame, and that's going to trigger a synthesizer.
So I'm sending the MIDI data, the raw numbers from Max, the velocity or volume.
Sounds quite weird, but it works. Here in this example, you'll see
on the axis
we're talking
motion
about
there.
iOS
now,
data.
if I take that data and attach it to a synthesizer,
so the movement of the phone does a similar thing. I can demonstrate that if you like at the end of this presentation.
An interesting sound. Now, if I was to connect
here, we're talking about game
my
controllers.
Controller here.
Now those sounds that are being triggered, you see the numbers flying around there. Those sounds are actually is data, raw data flowing across Bluetooth from the device, picking up accelerometer information and being translated into musical notes, MIDI notes. So in conclusion, the limits of the study is not going to produce a commercially viable piece of software that can be sold to a school. The study is going to produce findings that suggest what the best technologies are going to be. Those findings will be produced through prototyping of the software and reflection and reference to the literature. That's as far as the study goes. That's the limit of the study. We'll be looking closely at regional Australia and how these, making comments on how these devices and how these things could be used by regional students to help mitigate some of those issues between the regional paradigm and the urban paradigm. Dance education, I hope, will have the ability, I hope that this study will allow for expansion of ideas and augmentation of possibilities of the use of technology within the dance curriculum. Firstly at New South Wales level and then obviously across the national level, which is incredibly important given that we are looking down the barrel of a national curriculum which is looking to diminish the performing and creative arts. I think it's very important that we move to augment the possibilities for performing and creative arts. In the syllabus, there are very scant references to the use of technology, and I feel that this research will allow for that to be expanded upon. Talking predominantly about film, but very vaguely. I think that I can add some precision to perhaps even this document or offer some suggestions. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation this morning, and I look forward now to questions.